r/AskReddit. What's the most satisfying act of I don't give a duck that you have ever witnessed? My cashier in Amsterdam was literally just taking my groceries and sliding them across but not scanning them and then putting them into my bag. She scanned the last thing for like €2 and goes, "That'll be €2. She did not give even half of one duck. Probably her last day of work. The cashier we all need when grocery shopping. Someone's girlfriend was cussing them out in the middle of a mall. This dude called up his mate and asked to get a ride home and left her speechless. Don't know how that relationship ended up. You probably saw it. Back when I worked at a movie theater, one of my fellow assistant managers, Jack, had the constant attitude of not giving a duck. He'd worked at the theater longer than anyone and was good friends with the general manager, so he got away with murder. One time this lady wanted a refund for a movie she'd finished watching. She was going crazy, screaming at us about how the movie was so inappropriate to be rated PG-13 and she couldn't stand all the swearing in the movie. I kept calmly trying to explain to her that since the movie was already over we couldn't give her a refund. Our policy clearly stated no refunds after 30 minutes into showtime. She's not hearing it, and looks to Jack now, like he will give her the answer she wants. He starts saying the same thing I did, and she interrupts him again with her yelling about how she couldn't stand all the swearing in the film. Jack rolls his eyes and just says, "Well, that's just too ducking bad," and walks off. Cue stunned look on my face and the ladies. I was in line at a coffee shop and the lady was complaining that they didn't have organic milk, and without a word or hesitation the guy behind the counter just said, "Next please," not even taking her order. Didn't see it, but it was talked about at my old restaurant. My autistic friend was getting an interview for a second restaurant job. The chef doing the interview asked this question and got this response: "I could be the biggest a-hole when things get heated. How do you feel about that?" Well, if that's the case, then I don't want to work for you. My ex-boss had a customer throw her money on the counter when my boss clearly had her hand already out waiting to be given the money. So when my boss went to give the change, she just threw it back. Coins went everywhere, but the look on the lady's face was priceless. One casual employee decided to stop using proper radio procedure. Instead of using his correct call sign, he replied on the radio with Super John Smith, not his real name. He kept doing it all night despite dispatchers, supervisors and co-workers telling him to stop. He still works there and has outlasted hundreds of employees. I'd say his work-life balance is pretty good. I still call him Super John to this day. Was living and working from home on a super busy street. One day I hear a ruckus out front. There's an SUV stopped in the middle of the road. The occupants apparently having a fight. No traffic could get by. And wouldn't you know it, like 10 cars back there's a deputy's car. Deputy walks up, already pissed off by the shape of his stride. Now I couldn't hear anything up to this point, but things got very loud. He demanded to know what the issue was. Driver wanted the passenger out of the car. Deputy asks the passenger, "Whose car?" Passenger begrudgingly says it's the driver's, but that they help pay for it. Deputy, "Out of the car." Passenger, "But, deputy, now, out." Passenger gets out, goes to stand on the curb as directed. Deputy, to the driver, "Drive." Passenger, "But how am I supposed to get home?" Deputy, "Walk." Turns, walks off into sunset. Seriously, that last walk was the coldest damn command I'd ever heard. The deputy was 100,000% done with everyone's shit that day. Some Karen was beefing about a 25-cent off coupon. The coupon was for a 42-ounce bottle of something, but she wanted a 28-ounce bottle. The coupon was rejected when scanned, because, duh, there was no product to match it. There was nothing the cashier could do, but Karen just kept demanding 25 cents off. Finally, the guy ahead of me in line marched up to the counter, slapped a quarter down, and said, "There's your ducking 25 cents off. Now pay your ducking bill so the rest of us can go on with our days." At Costco, this older gentleman was screaming at my boss because apparently all the handicap parking spots were occupied. My boss asked for his information so he could write a complaint. We had little forms for that. Nothing really official, mostly to shut up people. "Are you a member?" "No." "Well, that it's then." My boss then put the little form in the garbage can and walked away. The old man was stunned. Little bit late, but at Air Force basic training when you first show up you're either in civilian clothes or the uniform with sneakers, because they don't want to duck up your feet I guess, and are affectionately called sneaker weakers. While a chow at the table behind you gets up, you need to get up and leave regardless if you're finished. If 2 tables behind you get up you'll be swarmed by MTIs and have them scream in your face until you do get up. I had just put my tray back and started to walk out when I look back and see one lone sneaker weaker by himself in a row of 5 or 6 tables, surrounded by 6 MTIs. Kid is staring straight ahead and just eating his food one spoonful at a time while the MTIs scream in his face. Finishes his food, sets his spoon down, picks up his drink and just slowly finishes his water, turns his glass over, puts it down, picks up his tray and walks up to put it away while still being screamed at by 6 MTIs. Kid is walking out and I realize everyone in the room is staring at him. He has no emotion, no fear, no smirk, nothing as he walks out of the chow hall. Worked a shitty fast food job when I was 15. Girl I worked with got fired. The manager was a real witch, says to her as she's escorting her out of the building that she needs to return her work shirt cleaned. Girl whipped it right off and threw it at her, walked out to her car in her black bra and drove off. Damn, I wish I'd got her number. My location for work has 1k people being laid off in 5 weeks. We've basically started doing the bare minimum. We've been playing Cards Against Humanity and streaming TV shows. We do about 2 hours of work, then spend the next 7 ducking around. Speaking of, I got to go. I'm hosting the next game. In college we had this prof for physics who liked to pick on a few students, basically me and a few others. We had an exam, and he would take off major points over trivial items. Cases where people were getting the correct answers but he didn't agree with our work. Shit like that. And we're talking getting 2/20 on a question, which pretty much ducks you over. After insulting us, the prof gets up and solves a problem on the board, and made a trivial mistake. The kind of one that nearly caused us all to fail his class. One of the guys gets up, writes F on the board, flicks him off and walks off. Truly the hero we need. Had an inland flight about 3 years ago. This kid in the row behind me, prob 6-8 years old, started to kick my seat after takeoff. It was not a long flight, about 1.5 hours, but I hate this kinda shit. So I turned around and sure enough, that prick was kicking my seat, while his mom and dad was sitting on either side of him, pretending to not notice. First I kindly asked the dad if he could make him stop, and he somewhat tried to convince his kid to stop. The kid sulked, but seemed to get the memo, at least for 1 minute, and then proceeded to kick my seat again. And once again I turned around, and this time, dropped the pleasantries, and told them that this was a golden opportunity to teach their kids some manners, as this is Norway, and some people are starting to feel more entitled than others. This didn't go that well, and mom started to yell at me, and that he is just a kid, and needs to express himself. It is at this moment the flight attendant arrives, and I try to explain the situation, while this kid's shitty mom and dad tries to bagatelize my complaint by saying I am the one who is making a scene. The flight attendant, not wanting any trouble as we are miles above ground, tries to explain that kicking the seat can be annoying and that we all should just get along. Flight attendant leaves, and kicking commences, so I simply picked up my stuff, walked to the row behind them, asked the woman behind them if she would be so nice to could move to the window seat, so I could get the middle seat. She just smiled and nodded. I sat down behind the kid, and started kicking for the 40-50 minutes that was left of the flight. Too long didn't read, kid was kicking the back of my seat. Parents didn't want to do anything about it. Traded to a seat behind them, and started kicking the kid's seat. Edit. Apparently bagatelize is not an English word, and what I meant was trivialize. Sorry. Edit 2. Wow, thank a lot for the awards. I'm new to Reddit so I am not sure what it does, but I am happy either way. Also I would thank you all for the support. Reddit truly is a great community. Nothing too crazy here. Some customer on the phone was laying on the entitled wanker attitude a little too heavily the other day, so I hit that end call button. No warnings, no drama. Just not dealing with your bullshit. Soz. People who call someone asking for their help, only to give them attitude, really aren't very smart. Edit. Also, this story MT dad told me of his school days. He was chewing gum. Teacher asked him to spit it out. He refused. So the teacher casually walked over to my dad, picked him up and placed him into the bin. Guessing my dad was too shocked to fight him. Work in Geek Squad. Another agent was really upset that day and had a rough patch of a few clients who were really mean and extremely rude to him. After bearing through them and after about a 10-minute break he helped another client. Their first words were alright. Best Buy gave me a shit product that broke after 6 months and I want you to fix it right now, which he explained that there's a process and he couldn't fix it right now and the guy cut him off and said I don't care. Get it done. Well, he sat there for a second quiet and took off his badge, slapped it on the table, yelled "Duck you," then started walking towards the front door with middle fingers up pointing at everyone, then said "and duck this place," and walked out. When I went home and on Steam I saw he bought GTA 5. He then had 200 hours played in 2 weeks after that. Haven't checked since. It was me doing it. I worked at a 24-hour restaurant. My shifts mostly were WED. Thursday, Friday, Saturday and Sunday, 6 PM to 4 AM. The manager of the restaurant really believed I wanted his job, so he would write me up for the most ridiculous things. One time he wrote me up for a bad review from a customer on a night that I wasn't even working. That one got him in trouble with the regional manager. Moving forward, it was a stupidly busy Saturday night. About 5:45 PM, I got into work and he met me with yet another write-up. This time for allowing the kitchen to run out of a particular item during my last shift. I didn't even do the orders, but apparently it was my fault. So, I went back to my car, took off my uniform, put on normal clothes I had in there, walked up to the kitchen counter where he was busy with the kitchen staff and some waitresses and waiters. He looked at me, told me what area I would be working that night. I looked him dead in the eye and said I don't think so. He said it again, and again I said I don't think so, this time handing him all of my uniforms. As I turned to walk out of the restaurant, he called out after me, "You can't do this. You are rostered on." I turned, pulled my height and said, "Oh honey, I can." And I just did, as I have been rostered for only 37 hours in total each week for the past 6 weeks. It is deemed I am part-time. As a part-time employee, I am only required to submit my resignation. I am not required to give you any notice. He called me about an hour later and begged me to go back. Yep, duck you mate. That's not happening. One of my high school teachers was just before retirement. I remember on the day of the final exam he handed out the test papers, then sat down at his desk and read the newspaper, with it open up all the way in front of him. He couldn't see us and vice versa. The smart girl in front finished first and just passed her paper back. It went all around the class. Not the first duck was given by him on that day. This girl at my school had just recently moved in but never really said much. She also had very short hair, and because of the area I live in, a lot of people made fun of her for this. One day some guy went up to her, calling her a FG and a DKE. I guess she finally had enough of people teasing her and told him I had cancer, so duck off. When I delivered pizza we had this older driver, prob in his 20s, who came back from a delivery and was pretty annoyed. A few minutes later the store got a phone call complaining about him. Essentially what happened was, a regular pie delivered was $11.97 and the person handed him $12 and asked for their change. He said okay, went back to his car and got 3 pennies and looked the woman in the eyes and rolled the pennies between her legs into her house and walked back to his car. Imagine this. Summer camp for special need kids. A counselor leading a child away by the arm. Counselor, I'm very disappointed in you, Ellie. Ellie, shut the duck up and lose weight, Susan. I was at a restaurant recently. While I was waiting for my friends to arrive I noticed a couple a few tables away. The lady was going on and on. I couldn't hear the exact words, but it was pretty obvious that they were having a heated argument where she was apparently scolding her so. And the guy was just sitting there having an occasional spoonful of his dessert. Exactly 3 minutes and he just stands up and walks away. He goes out of the restaurant, gets in his car and drives away. I was sitting at a table near the window facing the street, and the woman was in absolute shock. The look on her face was priceless. I mean, I shouldn't judge their relationship without context, but the guy sure didn't give a flying fart about what happened next. Fat a-hole yelling at the waitress because he didn't get any free bread rolls. The place doesn't serve that. One of the chefs went to him with a baguette and tried to forcefully feed the guy. I've learned that the a-hole always tried to get free food. The old management gave it to him to keep his mouth shut, but apparently the other employees had enough. Super late, but anyways, my older sister has some, but the most satisfying was when back in 2015 we were both working at this shitty place with a shitty boss, bad pay, etc, etc. The job consisted on us listening to recordings of multiple radio stations and identifying all the ads that played during the day. The company provided the cheapest headphones, so it was hard to hear. Sometimes the audio quality was horrendous, so we were stressed because sometimes you couldn't hear well, and we have a dateline. So there was this lady who acted like a gossipy teenager but was well over her 30s, married with kids. She would not shut the duck up, and since she started working there, girls who used to be quiet had started to talk and yell loudly because of her. So one day, just when we had started our shift, this woman arrives and starts practically yelling. She was getting louder every day, I swear. And my sister, a barely 5'1" woman, stands up and screams at the top of her lungs to shut the duck up. She said something like, "I don't arrive early to hear your gossip. I need to work and you're a hindrance in the office. Grow up, you're not a little kid. You should know how to behave yourself, and if you have any problem with me, let's fix it outside. I'm not afraid to beat the shit out of you." All this was in Spanish, so my translation is not the best. Just imagine more rage and cursing. After it was dead silent, nobody talked after that for hours, and the woman went to the bathroom to cry and no one did anything to my sister. Our direct boss only told her to speak kindly next time, but no repercussions. I guess many others were fed up with this woman, but I will never forget it. I would have cheered if I hadn't been in shock. I was working a double at a restaurant after closing the night before. The shift started at 10 AM and ended around 11 PM with a 30 minutes break between lunch and dinner service. I was about 5 minutes late, and the manager, read owner's errand boy, tells me about half an hour before my lunch break that the owner says I have to stay on my break. Now the owner was real pose. I have stories to tell about that guy. I looked that spineless manager in the face and said, "You can tell owner he can go duck himself." I got fired so fast for that shit, and it was way worth it. I was tired of making money for that schmuck. My friend once told the PE teacher to duck off. The PE teacher made us all run some laps. After the 4th lap, my friend stopped to take a breath and the PE teacher told him, "Why are you standing just there?" My friend said with no care, "How about you run, fat ass?" Satisfying because it blew up in her face. Lived in a town with a high population of Armenians. Girl posts that she's glad the Armenian genocide happened and is acting like she doesn't care what people are saying when she gets to school. Legit death threats start coming in, and her boyfriend has to leave the school from all the harassment. Her family ended up moving because people kept up the onslaught even months later. This girl was an awful person. I was at a car race with my mom and grandpa. We sat in our normal seat and this huge family sat directly in front of us. The parents would stand up, in our way, every single time a race started and ended. Usually the most exciting parts. We decided to move, just scooting a few feet to the left cause it wasn't super busy. Also the reason we couldn't figure out why they had to sit right in our way. They all left to get food for like 40 minutes and my mom was already irritated, so when they came back and sat exactly in front of us again, she was furious. They stood up again for the beginning and end of all the races, and on one of the last few my mom had it. She stood up and spoke loudly, not screamed or anything. "Are you stupid?" They turned, stunned for a few seconds, before muttering something about my mom being rude and moving to the complete other side of the seats. We went back to our normal spots and enjoyed the rest of the races. It's now a very funny inside joke between us. I was playing paintball in Oklahoma at a D-Day event. A lot of the guys there are vets or currently in. There was a guy that was pissed because he got shot and he confronted the guy that shit him and pulled a knife. Little did he know the guy was SF and he just goes like, "What are you gonna do with that?" The pissed guy tries to stab him and the SF guy proceeded to break his wrist and take his knife like nothing ever happened. Refs watched it happen too. Nobody said anything. I worked in a hotel that had a full service restaurant with a buffet in the center of it. Minutes before closing up, we had a Karen come in with a friend. She was already pissed and whining because the hotel gave her vouchers for the buffet, but she wanted to order off the menu and didn't like that she'd have to pay for it. She ended up ordering 2 eggs and wanted them poached hard. I bring them out and she immediately stabs the egg and complains that the yolk is too soft. Sends them back. We check and it's a standard hard poach. She just wants them rock hard apparently. I bring out the next set. Same complaint and they're sent back again. Repeat once more. Our cook was an old a-hole that had been working there 30 plus years and very obviously ran out of ducks to give a long time ago. After I brought the last set back, he cursed under his breath and said he'd bring out the last set. He was done and wanted to go home. I go out to clean off some tables and see him storm out with a plate. He goes to the buffet, in full view of Karen, grabs 2 hard-boiled eggs, and walks them to her, throws the plate down without a word and walks back to the kitchen. It took everything I had not to burst out laughing as Karen stares in shock for a few seconds before she starts screeching to our manager. I worked at a Burger King in South Jersey for a long time and no one gives a shit about anyone there. Most people swear at least once a sentence, so little innocent southern me could get away with a lot. The first occasion was a man I asked to pull up while we cook his fries. I walked out and apologized for the wait and he yelled, "I've been waiting 15 ducking minutes for these fries, I want a refund." I knew it hadn't been that long so I just said, "I'm so sorry. Do you have your receipt still?" He handed it to me and I pointed to the timestamp on the bottom. Pulled out my phone and showed him it had only been 3 minutes and just said "have a nice night" and walked back inside. Second, I was changing trash bags and a customer came up and I said, "Just leave your tray on the table next to me and I'll throw it out for you when I'm done." They dumped tray and all into the bagless trash can and smirked at me and I said, "Get the duck out, a-hole." Manager laughed at this one. Lastly, some jerk came through the line 30 seconds before we closed but we had to take the call so I pull him up and had to cook his entire order from scratch. I come out 6 minutes later and he laughed and said very rudely, "Wow, you really put the fast in fast food." To which I said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you were going to come 30 seconds before we closed. I could have given you the patty that rolled under the broiler at lunch and soggy 20 minutes old fries, but I cooked everything fresh for you, so have a fan ducking." Tastic night. He was shocked but my manager about died laughing when I told him and we kept giggling about it for the rest of closing. In my old college, we had a rule that once a test was turned in, no other tests would be given out. Some kids who were failing the class already would write their name and turn in the test, which meant any late students were effectively screwed. In line for security at the airport, this man is freaking out at the SAR agent that one of his wife's shoes got stuck on the conveyor belt, and without missing a beat that SAR agent responds, "You sure she had to? Bro, you made it to the end, you're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content. It's free and that's a great price."